Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi wahdahu, wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dahu, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tamassaka bi sunnatihi ila yawm ad-din, wa sallama tasliman kathira, amma ba'd. As we continue, 6:09 p.m., Thursday, March the 17th, 2022, بالميلاد أو بالتاريخ الميلادي أو التاريخ الميلادي, or the Gregorian calendar, or the Gregorian date rather, which agrees with Tariq al-Hijri, which agrees with the Islamic calendar or the Islamic date, which currently the 14th of Sha'ban, the year 1443, after the migration of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this day of Thursday. We ask Allah to make this liqa mubarak, make it a blessed sitting, which we benefit, to attain knowledge, raising the ignorance off of ourselves, and drawing close to Him by learning the most important of all matters of our religion, which is the aqidah as-salaf. As we continue the tremendous book by the great Imam Taqiyuddin Ahmad Abdul Halim Ibn Abdul Salam Ibn Taymiyyah Al-Harrani Al-Dimashqi rahimahullah, mutawaffa sanata 128, the one who died 728 after the migration of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We were speaking about the affair of Ta'weel, and we said that Ta'weel was of different meanings. You have the first type of ta'weel, which is madhmoom, which is dispraiseworthy. You'll find that is the type in which you'll find those who've been affected by Greek philosophy or Greek philosophy and Greek logic have been affected with, even though they use the word ta'weel for something else. But in actuality, the meaning or how they're using it is for the dispraiseworthy meaning of the word ta'weel, which is tahrif, which is distortion. Distortion. And that's what we were discussing the last class, based upon the ayah which comes in Surah Al-Imran, ayah number 7. We said that one could go back a little bit to ayah number 5, Surah Al-Imran. We were discussing the matter where we said the meaning of the ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His book, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. No one knows its ta'weel except Allah. We said that there were two recitations, and this we'll explain in this lesson, inshallah. So you'll find that they use the word ta'weel here for their so-called agenda, or their so-called desires. They think the word ta'weel is from those affairs that only Allah Ta'ala knows, from the names and attributes, where they entrust the meanings also to Allah. And you'll find, as we said, the meaning of how they use it, meaning the people from the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah, those who have been affected by Greek philosophy, the Greek logic. We said that they use the word ta'weel based upon this ayah. If you look in Surah Al-Imran, ayah number 7. If you look at it, and then if you look in the verse, in the Mus'haf, you'll find that there's a waqf, there's a stop, right at lafz al-jalala, where it says, illallah. No one knows its ta'weel except Allah. We said that there are two recitations. If you was to go or return back to the aqwal, the statements of the Salaf, and what Ibn Abbas mentioned, there are two recitations. The first one, as we mentioned, is one where he stopped on the lafz al-jalala, illallah, and one stops in the recitation. But you'll find that the people desires from the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah, they say, see, here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's a ta'weel, there's a type of ta'weel that only Allah knows. So that's what they're saying here. See, and from those affairs that only Allah knows, from the names and the attributes, where one can entrust the meanings. So what they call a tafweed al-mutlaq, absolute entrustment to Allah in regards to the meanings of the names and attributes of Allah. So when you hear the word ascension of Allah or descension of Allah to the third heaven, or to the heaven of the dunya, meaning the lower heaven at the third part of the night, that's not what's intended. And when you hear the word descension of Allah, the last third part of the night, entrust its meaning to Allah. Meaning there's no meaning to it. Some of them, they say, just entrust the meaning to Allah. Entrust it. No one knows that except Allah. And they'll say to you, our evidence is the verse in Al-Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no one knows his ta'weel except Allah. So they're entrusting the meaning to Allah ta'ala, and we said that that's incorrect. When a person hears the word descension of Allah to the last third part of the night, one knows its meaning. That's the reason why you stand up in that part of the night to make dua, because you know its meaning. And if it was meaningless, why would you get up in the third part of the night to make dua to Allah in that time where you know it's virtuous, where Allah will accept your dua or your invocation? Right, so that's what they say. They say no one knows his ta'weel except Allah. And that meaning of these type of characteristics of Allah's ascension or descension or face or hands or what have you, entrust these meanings to Allah. We said that recitation is correct, that one stop at the ayah that's been narrated upon Ibn Abbas and other than them from the Sahaba and the great scholars of this religion, from the Tabi'een, that particular recitation is authentic, it's correct. However, as we mentioned and said, they didn't distinguish between meaning of speech, of those names and attributes of Allah, and the other meaning of ta'weel, which is tafsir. Tafsir meaning explanation or commentary. So, they say that these affairs don't have any meaning to them, so we trust its meaning. And the affairs of tafsir, likewise, as that's another meaning of the word ta'weel that we will discuss today, inshallah. So, based upon what Ahl Sunnah, what the people of the truth, what they believe in regards to the meaning of this ayah, what does it mean? We said that it means this yesterday. It means when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says no one knows its ta'weel except Allah, the word ta'weel here is no one knows the true reality or how his attributes are, or his essence, or his actions, tabaraka wa ta'ala. No one knows these realities except Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And that is the ta'weel that no one knows except Allah. That is the ta'weel that no one knows except Allah. No one knows how Allah ta'ala, his face is subhanahu. As we know, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, that he spoke to Allah directly, and he only seen Allah ta'ala from behind the hijab. And the hijab is light. When the Messenger of Allah ascended above the seven heavens, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the Messenger of Allah, when our Lord subhanahu had made the duty or the obligation of praying the 5 prayers directly, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the hadith, when his Lord addressed him, he said, Nurun an la ara, light, how can I see him? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the hijab of light. The point of why we're mentioning this, no one knows the face of Allah. No one knows the true reality of these characteristics of Allah except Him. That is the meaning of the ayah. Is it clear, everyone? So the meaning of the ayah again is the reality or the true reality and how these characteristics are, and His essence, in the true reality of His names and characteristics and His actions. No one knows that except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one recitation which is correct. But when you stop at that recitation, this is what it means. Does it mean, based upon what they say, that the ta'wil here means that we entrust the meanings, that there's no really meanings to these verses, or that it means something else, and that the apparent meaning is not what's intended, so you have to bring another meaning in order for the intellect to accept it? No, that's not its meaning. We said that its meaning here is the true reality of His names and attributes, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But so, based upon that, you'll find that they mentioned what Shaykh al-Islam said in the statement. If you look in the book, he says, فَإِنَّهُ وَقْفَ كَثِيرٍ مِنَ السَّلَفِ. Rather, that is the stop of a lot of the Salaf. Meaning upon that stop that we mentioned, Surah Al-Imran, where it says, no one knows His ta'wil except Allah. He said, that recitation is authentic. He said, ثم فرقوا بين كلام معنى الكلام وتفسيره وبين التأويل الذي انفرد الله تعالى بعلمه وظنوا أن التأويل في كلام الله هو التأويل المذكور في كلام المتأخرين وغلطوا في ذلك. This is what we're going to explain right now. He said, then you'll find that they distinguish between the affairs of ta'wil. We have the ta'wil that's considered tahrif, distortions. And then you have the ta'wil that has a praiseworthy ta'wil, which we'll discuss now, which is commentary or explanation of the verse. And then you have the ta'wil that we'll speak about in a moment, which the third meaning is in which the affairs or the outcome of affairs, in which they will return back to, or what they will inevitably become in the end. That we will also mention in a moment. Let's go with what Shaykh al-Islam mentions. So now he's talking about ta'wil, and this is where we stopped at last class. He said, verily what is intended by ta'wil is three meanings. He said, ta'wil fi istilahi kathir min al-muta'akhirin huwa sarf al-lafz عن الاحتمال الراجح إلى احتمال المرجوح بدليل يقترن بذلك. We'll just read it quickly because we already mentioned this last night. He said, ta'wil in the terminology of a lot of those who came in the later generations, من المتأخرين, who came later. You see, for those who've been affected by Greek philosophy in its rhetoric, in its way of thinking, and you'll find that a lot of them were affected in the knowledge of usul fiqh. You'll find that from the terminology, the meaning of ta'wil of those who came later is when they say صرف اللفظ عن الاحتمال الراجح, is to take away an apparent meaning of a word. To take away the apparent meaning of a word when you hear it from the correct meaning, was to correct when a person hears it, to a weak meaning. To a weak probability or a weak meaning with a dalil or so-called claimed evidence that comes along with that. What the person was saying, what is that evidence? We'll speak about that right now, don't worry. So Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, he said, فَفَعْلِي فَلَا يَكُونْ مَعْنَى اللَّفْظِ الْمُوَافِقِ لِدَلَالَةِ ظَاهِرِهِ تَأْوِيلًا عَنْ اصْطِلَاحِ هَؤُلَاءِ. He said, for verily the meaning of a word that agrees of what the apparent meaning indicates, it should not be called ta'wil upon the terminology of what they say. So, what is he speaking about? So it should be called what? Distortion. And it shouldn't be called ta'wil. And if you use the word ta'wil, this is what should be intended, distorting the meaning. Because that's what distortion is. وَظَنُّوا أَنَّ مُرَادَ اللَّهِ بِلَفْظِ التَّأْوِيلِ ذَلِكَ. He said, and they thought that what Allah intends when these verses, as far as His names and attributes that have come through revelation or been conveyed through revelation, is the بِلَفْظِ التَّأْوِيلِ ذَلِكَ, that the wording here, where what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used for Himself and those names and attributes, that we have to resort to this type of meaning of ta'wil, which is distortion. said this is what we needed to do. So they say that the nusus, meaning the verses in the Quran and in the Sunnah, they have a ta'wil, meaning a distortion that is in opposition to what they indicate when a person hears it. The only one that knows it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or the first generations, or those who came first, knows it. As some of them say, some of them. So then Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, ثُمَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنْ هَؤُلَاءِ يَقُولُونَ. Then a lot of them, they say, that it is applicable to the apparent meaning when you hear the word. And that the apparent meaning is what's intended. Despite their statement, them saying at the same time, it still needs to be what? It needs to be changed or distorted with this other meaning that we want to put in its place. Or saying that the meaning is all entrusted to Allah and that no one knows it except Him. Shaykh al-Islam even mentions this in the same sentence. He says, that's tanaqud. He said, that's contradictory. It doesn't make any sense. How can you say, when a person says a word, you understand what they're saying based upon when they say it, but you have to investigate a little bit more in order to what? Know what they truly intend. That doesn't make any sense. Just as I gave a couple of examples a couple of weeks ago, everyone. We mentioned this as for example. Someone says, I'm going upstairs. It's clear, I'm going upstairs. When a person says that, you know that they're going upstairs. So if you go upstairs and you find them downstairs, and then you go to them, you said, you see you were going upstairs. No, that's not what I intended. What I intended was down. I intended another meaning. How would you know that? Based upon when you hear it. So, based upon that, unless the person tells you, they say, listen, when I say upstairs, what I mean specifically to myself, not saying that that's the linguistic famous meaning that everybody knows when they say it. Unless you say it, right? Like, this is what I'm intending. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So, now you're saying that basically these are the games or so-called or riddles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is playing with the most important of all affairs, which is Aqidah. These are the affairs that doesn't make sense. So that's what he's mentioning there. He said, so another statement that he said, هذا تناقض, that's contradictory. وقع فيه كثير من هؤلاء المنتسبين إلى السنة. A lot of those who ascribe themselves to the Sunnah fell into this. From the companions of the so-called four great Imams and other than them, which we'll discuss. But, so let's go on and look at what he mentions. It says, forget the 2 rakat. Huh? I said, don't forget. I'm not there. Oh, you sat down. No. Oh. You can't sit down though until you pray. Unless you put it in the chair and look through your bag, put it in your chin. Make sound. طيب. يقول الشيخ الإسلام تيمية. So basically what he said. So let's now go and explain the statement. He said, for verily ta'wil is intended by 3 statements, which we have to differentiate between. He said, for verily the ta'wil and the istilah, the terminology of a lot of those who came later. Who's he speaking about when he says, the later generation? He's talking about the scholars of rhetoric and Greek philosophy. And the Muslims have been affected by it. The ulama al-kalam. Those have been affected by logic, rhetoric, and the likes. That's what he's speaking about. The deviant group specifically we're speaking about is the Asha'ira, al-Kullabiyya, and the Maturidiyya. Because this whole book revolves around the characteristic of Allah Ta'ala and the names and attributes that's been conveyed through the revelation, which is called the Sifat al-Khabariyya. That's the topic of this book, in which those who fell into it in the most confusing way were the Asha'ira, where they affirmed some of the attributes and distorted others. But the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila were easy. Why? Because they just negated most everything. The affair that was confusing, especially to a lot of the Muslims in the lands was the affair of the Asha'ira, Al-Kullabiyah, and the Maturidiyah. Why? Because they affirmed some and what? Negated and distorted others. That's the reason why he's taken the opportunity in order to what? Focus on them and the most of what we're mentioning here, as far as those groups have been affected by, as they say, Greek philosophy. But keep in mind, I mentioned and repeat this over and over. Why? Because that is the issue, that they've been affected by what? Greek philosophy and logic. They adopted it, and as a result, anything that's shown to the intellect or the mind, if it's not accepted, then it's what? It's rejected. If the mind can't fathom it or comprehend it or accept it, then it's rejected. Those groups, as he said, when Shaykh al-Islam, if you look at your book, it said the later generation, he's speaking about specifically the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah. That's what he's speaking about. So, look at what he goes on to say. He said, for verily you'll find that the meaning of what? This affair of Tadweel with them is صرف اللفظ عن الاحتمال الراجح إلى الاحتمال المرجوح لدليل يقترن بذلك. He says to take away the apparent meaning of a word from what is known amongst the people. Al-ihtimal al-rajih, the strongest probability, which is the people when they hear, for example, I'm coming towards you. When you hear it, you know what they intend. Everybody understands when somebody says, I'm entering, it's clear. So, he said, taking away that strong wording to what is what? Weak. Due to an evidence that comes along with that. But what is this evidence? So you'll find that they mention this, say, سواء كان الدليل صحيحا أو مدعى. He says, doesn't matter whether the evidence is authentic or it's so-called proclaimed, or it hasn't been supported with any evidences. He says, in most cases you'll find that the evidence that is used is not authentic in regards to the names and characteristics of Allah Ta'ala. And the Ma'awila from the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah, and those similar to them, you'll find that they distort the meanings of the names and attributes of Allah due to a so-called evidence they have. And you'll ask them, ما الدليل المانع من بقاء اللفظ على المعنى الراجح? What is the evidence that prevents you from leaving the word upon its apparent meaning? When you hear the word Allah's ascension, or Allah's dissension, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laughter, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being amazed, or amazed at the slave that makes tawbah, and those type of narrations that bring these type of characteristics, that they say, no. It has to be something taken out of its apparent meaning and twisted to another one. What's your dalil for that? So what is Shaykh al-Islam asking them? What is the mani', the thing that is prevented from you leaving the word upon what is apparent, until you now have to go to this weak meaning that is utilized? Mad dalil. What's the evidence? The evidence is simple with them. The evidence what you call al-istihalat al-aqliyah, the so-called mind or the so-called intellect. Is he okay? The thing that prevents one from accepting the apparent wording or meaning when you hear it is what they call al-istihalat al-aqliyah, the intellectual so-called impossibility. The intellectual impossibility. Meaning that the aql didn't accept it. So, all of the characteristics that have been distorted with the Asha'ira, Al-Kullabiyah, Wal-Maturidiyah, they have no evidence in order for the word to remain upon its apparent meaning when it is heard, that would necessitate it had to be distorted, except what is called al-istihalat al-aqliyah, meaning the intellectual impossibility. And this so-called al-istihalat al-aqliyah, this intellectual impossibility, he says is different from one of the groups to the next, starting from the Jahmiyyah, and then to the Mu'tazila, then between the Jahmiyyah and the Asha'ira, because all of them attack one another, but they all use the same what? Evidences in order to attack one another. That's why you'll find that they never come to an authentic, correct conclusion or result that agrees with Kitab and Sunnah, due to the fact that they're using the same basis in order to so-called establish their arguments. And when the foundation is corrupt, it all leads to more falsehood. Regardless of who falls into some of the truth and they have a little bit left with them, even though the majority is a falsehood, or them just totally being in falsehood. Just as the situation with the Jahmiyyah to the Ash'ari, where they do affirm some characteristics and then negate or distort the meanings of others. Fine. So hence, that is the dalil that is relied upon, so-called, that is called istihalat al-aqliyah, where it's not even an evidence. The so-called rationality or impossible intellectual usage, or they say that al-aql istihalat al-aqliyah, we know that that so-called intellectual impossibility, as they say, is not accepted in Kitab and Sunnah. That's the reason why, like we said, for them to say, utilize this type of concept in order to now so-called establish the truth is an affair that's rejected from Kitab and Sunnah, based upon there is no evidence in Kitab and Sunnah that the mind, regardless of what it accepts or rejects, is considered the evidence that we have to go upon. That is the matter that you'll find that he's trying to mention here. But anyway, Shaykh al-Islam is saying here, this is the first type of ta'weel, which is the dispraiseworthy meaning, which in actuality is called tahrif, which is called distortions. That's the first one. And like we said, what is the evidence that they use to say that the meaning does not deserve to remain upon its apparent meaning? They say al-istihala al-aqliyah, the intellectual impossibility. Right. So let's go on and see what Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say. وَظَنُّوا أَنَّ مُرَادَ اللَّهِ بِلَفْظِ التَّأْوِيلِ ذَلِكَ هو ذلك الذي يريدون الخروج باللفظ عن المعنى الراجح إلى المعنى المرجوح لدليل يدعى وأن للنصوص تأويلا مخالف لمدلولها ما يدل عليه اللفظ بالوضع لا يعلمه إلا الله أو يعلمه المتأولون. He said they thought that what Allah Ta'ala intended is by that wording that has to be distorted. That's what they intended, which is that one leaves out the apparent meaning of what the people know and what is famous amongst them, to a weak meaning due to an evidence that is so-called proclaimed, which is what they call what? The intellectual impossibility, meaning that the intellect so-called accepted or rejected. They say that no one knows that except Allah Ta'ala, or those who so-called know it are from the people of muta'awwilun, from the people of Taymiyyah. So, the angels didn't know its meaning, the prophets didn't know its meaning, and you'll find that they ascribe to them misunderstandings and great mistakes in regards to their so-called meaning of these verses, or meaning of the names and attributes of Allah, just to be more specific. That they claim that the ta'weel in regards to the speech of Allah Ta'ala is based upon the premises of those who've been affected by Greek philosophy, which is called the scholars of so-called rhetoric. So, in actuality, them ascribing to the angels and the prophets ignorance. That they're basically deficient. They didn't know these meanings, rather Allah knows them, and then when the Messenger of Allah recited these so-called verses, he didn't know their meanings. They needed to be entrusted to Allah. So, the affairs pertaining to the Message of Allah being the most complete of creation in regards to the human beings, in regards to their knowledge, in regards to Allah being the most complete. As we know, the Message of Allah was given all the perfect traits in regards to the human beings, as far as in speech, and as far as his understanding, and as far as his knowledge in regards to his Lord. He was the most perfect of the human beings. And that to say that no one knows these meanings except Allah, and that the Messenger of Allah did not know these meanings, or he intended something else when he recited it or conveyed it to the people, was something that, as we mentioned and said, which is a grave mistake. Either the Messenger of Allah was ignorant of certain affairs, or the Messenger of Allah betrayed his trust by not conveying it to the people, by him saying that even though I'm saying to you that when I recite this verse that Allah descends or ascends, that which you find that what's apparent is not what's intended. There's another meaning intended. But the Messenger of Allah never said that. But based upon what these people are saying, they're ascribing to the Messenger of Allah ignorance and deficiency in regards to his conveyment, how he clarified it, or he betrayed his trust by not saying it or disclosing it to the people. And these are the affairs you'll find the Shaykh al-Islam saying. Notice that he goes on to say in the book, he said this is contradictory. He says, and a lot of those who ascribe to the Sunnah, so he's talking about the Muslims, especially from those who are the companions of the four great Imams. The Shaykh al-Islam is talking about a people that what's been conveyed through the history has reached us. You'll find even the great Imam Muhammad al-Jabi mentioned this. He said, الظاهرون غير مراد ولكن الشيخ له اطلاع وغير اطلاعنا. He said, of what we acquire, the knowledge, we say, he said that الظاهرون غير مراد. He said, of what is apparent from what we see, we'll find that this is not the case. He said, what's been conveyed to us, meaning that all of them say the same thing. What's intent? What you read from the words and the names and attributes, it's not intended. That's what's been conveyed to us. He said, however, Shaykh al-Islam had a type of read or strength in regards to his acquisition of knowledge and him being familiar with different references. That's not our affair. And he had a greater what? Strength in that regard. So maybe perhaps that he acquired that there was a group that did have this type of what? This type of contradictive affair, which is that the apparent meaning is intended. But you read it, that's how it's understood, but know for sure there was something else behind it. So maybe he said that based upon some type of references that he acquired to say that there was a group that was like this. But however, whether or not we know them or not, the point of the matter is if one does claim this type of claim, we know that this is clearly a contradiction. How can you say, for example, I'm going upstairs, and then at the same time, you have to figure out what I'm truly intended when I say I'm going upstairs? No, what I mean, I'm going outside. Or what I'm going there, what I meant is I'm going downstairs. That doesn't make any sense. It's contradictory. And like we said, these type of riddles and games that these type of people are so-called claiming, Allah did not do that in the most important of all affairs that the people need to know, which is the affairs concerning his belief in Aqidah and affairs connected to it. These type of riddles and games, the religion is free from. There will never be this type of lughz or alghaz or ahaji or riddles that in the most vital of all affairs, when the people read them and hear it, that they think that something else is intended. Fine. So that's basically what we want to talk about as far as the first meaning of Taqweeyah. So just to sum it up, the meaning of Taqweeyah, the first one is what? The dispraiseworthy meaning, which is distortion, number one. Just to sum it up. Fine. Number two, the meaning of Taqweeyah is tafsir. Tafsir al-kalam. Now, so if you go back to the ayah, Surah Al-Imran, what does it say? It says, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب, ayah number 7. منه آيات محكمات هن الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم. So we have one recitation where it's the stop at the end of the ayah, which is ayah number 7, Surah Al-Imran. It says, illallah, where we said that stop has been authentic and has been informed by Ibn Abbas. You have the second type of recitation, illallah wal rasikhun fil ilm. The second recitation is to connect and stop at the end of the ayah where it says, no one knows his tadweel except Allah and those who are well grounded in knowledge. They say, يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب. It says all of it, they say we believe in it, all of it is from our Lord, and no one will take heed except the people of true sound understanding. There's two recitations in that ayah. The first we mentioned a couple of minutes ago. It says no one knows his tadweel except Allah. Then you have the second recitation where it's what? No one knows his tadweel except Allah and those who are well grounded in knowledge. That is the second meaning. The second meaning, which is tafsir. Tafsir. The meaning of tafsir, which is the explanation of something, to explain it, whether of what is apparent, or the explanation of it, of what one needs to know its meaning when it's explained. That something else is intended also. He said that this is the type of ta'weel which is the terminology of the majority of those scholars of tafsir, of commentary, and other than that. So let's read what Shaykh al-Islam says. والمعنى الثاني أن التأويل هو تفسير الكلام سواء وافق ظاهره أو لم يوافقه، وهذا التأويل في اصطلاح جمهور المفسرين وغيرهم، وهذا التأويل يعلمه الراسخون في العلم، هو موافق لوقف من وقف من السلف على قوله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم. آية سورة آل عمران آية نمبر 7. كما نقل ذلك عن ابن عباس ومجاهد ومحمد بن جعفر بن الزبير بن العوام القرشي المدني ومحمد بن إسحاق بن يسار المطلبي وأبو محمد عبد الله بن مسلم بن قتيبة الدينوري the great imam وغيرهم، وكلا القولين حق باعتبار كما قد بسطناه في مواضع أخرى، ولهذا نقل عن ابن عباس هذا وهذا وكلاهما حق. He said the second meaning is that ta'wil means to explain the speech of Allah, whether it agrees with what's apparent or it doesn't. And that is the ta'wil of the terminology of the majority of the scholars of commentary, meaning those who explain the Quran and other than that. That is the ta'wil that those who are well-grounded in knowledge know. And it also agrees with the recitation where it stops at the end of the ayah where it says, no one knows his ta'wil except Allah and those who are well-grounded in knowledge. Just as it's also been conveyed upon Ibn Abbas and Mujahid. Mujahid is who, everyone? Mujahid ibn Jabr, Abu al-Hajjaj al-Makhzumi, the Shaykh of all the recitations and the Imam of the Mufassirin. And you'll find that he said that I showed the Quran to Ibn Abbas more than 30 times of what he mentions. Mujahid ibn Jabr, Abu al-Hajjaj al-Makhzumi, he said that I have read the Quran to Ibn Abbas more than 30 times. So he goes on to say that Ibn Abbas conveyed this recitation also. The second also this recitation, meaning the second one, has been conveyed upon Mujahid, the one who showed the Quran more than 30 times to Ibn Abbas. And also from the great Imam Muhammad ibn Ja'far, Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr ibn al-Awam al-Asadi al-Madani. Also that was from the Fuqaha al-Madinah, Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr ibn al-Awam al-Qurashi al-Madani. And also the great Imam of Tafsir, Muhammad ibn Ishaq ibn Yasar al-Matlabi. And also the great Imam Abu Muhammad Abdullah ibn Muslim al-Daynuri, if you want to call him, Ibn Qutayba al-Daynuri, the great Imam. Sahib al-Tasalif. There's a lot of books that are very beneficial. The point of the matter is all of these scholars also convey the second recitation of this ayah, which is, except Allah, no one knows his ta'wil except Allah, those who are well-grounded in knowledge. Meaning, the tafsir of the verses and the tafsir of those so-called verses in the book of Allah, no one knows it except those who attain knowledge. And those who are ignorant they are not acquainted with it and they are ignorant of it. It says, وَكِلَا الْقَوْلَيْنِ حَقٌّ. Both statements are statements of truth and they all are considered. He said, just as we gave the details in other places. And for that reason, it's been conveyed upon Ibn Abbas, this recitation and the other one, and both of them are true. So now, we just go back to the statement of Shaykh al-Islam. Let's read it again. So the second meaning of ta'wil is tafsir. Or you could say bayan wal idah. Commentary, clarification, explanation, clarity. That's the second meaning. This is what you'll find in the books of tafsir. If you look at Tafsir ibn Jarir al-Tabari, you'll find that he puts in his book Ta'weel qawlillahi ta'ala, the ta'weel of the statement of Allah. What is he talking about here? He's talking about this meaning here. If you acquire the tafsir, you'll find that. It says, Ta'weel qawli Allah ta'ala. Ta'weel here means tafsir. So upon that, that's to let you know what is intended is clarifying the meaning of the ayah, not distorting it. But notice it says, notice Shaykh al-Islam, if you go back to your book, tafsir al-kalam, whether it agrees with its apparent or it doesn't agree with it. For example, if you look in the book of Allah Ta'ala, the word as-sama', the as-sama' has a lot of meanings. From them is ulu, loftiness, highness, aboveness. As-sama' also means sahab, means clouds. Sama' also means rain. As Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً, we have descended from the sama' water, meaning from the clouds. So, the explanation of the word sama', sometimes it can be rain, sometimes it can mean clouds, and sometimes it can mean al-mabani al-qawiyyah. It also can mean al-mabani al-qawiyyah, meaning those structures that are held up by the strength and power and might of Allah Ta'ala. What does it mean? Go back to Surah Al-Dhariyat, ayat number 47. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. The heavens, we have built it with aid, meaning by our strength. The word aid here is not the plural for yet. It's not. It's the masdar, it's a verbal pronoun. It's a verbal noun. It's not the plural form of hand. You'll find that the ulama tafsir said that the meaning of aid here is the masdar, meaning quwwah. It's the masdar, it's a verbal noun, which means quwwah. It comes from the word, the masdar, aid, the verb is ad ya'idu, which means qawiya yaqwa. And the word aid is quwwah. But anyway, if a person looks to the tafsir, he said, by the heavens, in the heavens we built it with strength. With strength. So the word tafsir, all of this is what? Correct. So when a person now reads the word as-sama', the word sama' can mean as-sama' dhatul ajram, or as-samawat dhatul ajram. He says, so now all these different meanings of the word sama'. How do you attain the true meaning of it? You go back to the what, everyone? The tafsir of it, in order to attain the meaning. So all those different aqwal, all those statements are being conveyed in the tafsir of the salaf. How do you attain it? You seek knowledge. Where do you seek knowledge? From the appropriate sources for one to return back to. Don't forget, where's everybody? Don't forget to pray to the cats, brothers. Don't forget, two like that. That's the strongest opinion. Enter the masjid, don't forget. He says, فَإِذَا فُسِّرَ بِالْقَلِيلَ وَالسِّيَاقِ بِشَيْءٍ آخَرَ السَّحَابِ. So it can mean clouds, it can mean rain. All of these affairs, or what, is considered ta'weel. So some of the people that they say in this regard, that this type of ta'weel, like we said, is acceptable. Which it is. And the only people that know it are the people of knowledge. Right, so let's go. So now Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, وَهَذَا التَّأْوِيلِ يَعْلَمُ الرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. That the ta'weel, the commentary, the explanation of those verses, those who are well grounded in knowledge, meaning those who've been established firmly in it. They have studied the Arabic language, they know what it means. They understand the lugha, they understand the language of the salaf. And those who truly were upon the correct way in aqidah, so those meanings are understood properly. For those who have not been well established in that regard, and they do not know the lugha of those who came from the first generations, it's upon them to ask the people of knowledge, in order for them not to fall into contradictions and mistakes in regards to the understanding of those verses in the book of Allah. So that is the first meaning, or the second meaning, everyone, of tafsir. So the second meaning of the word tafsir is what? Everyone. The second meaning of the word ta'weel is what again? Is what? Tafsir. Oh, you had to go? Fine. Just as been established upon Ibn Abbas and Mujahid and Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubair and Muhammad ibn Ishaq and other than them, that both of them also have conveyed this recitation. And you'll find that they say that no one knows his ta'wil except Allah, which is correct as far as his commentary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows and revealed the verses in a manner that He intended. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the meaning of the verses also. However, based upon the first recitation that we said, that the affair of ta'wil, meaning distortion, are based upon what those deviant sects say, that's not what's intended. The first recitation that we said, last lesson, what is intended, everyone, as we mentioned, is that no one knows the true reality of Allah's names and attributes and how they are except Him. Those are the matters, like we said, no one knows except Allah in that regard, based upon what we already expressed and what we already explained last night and today. Right, so let's move on. The third meaning of the word ta'wil, أن التأويل هو الحقيقة التي يؤول الكلام إليها وإن وافقت ظاهره فالتأويل ما أخبر به في الجنة من الأكل والشرب واللباس والنكاح وقيام الساعة وغير ذلك هو الحقائق الموجودة أنفسها لا ما يتصور من معانيها في الأذهان ويعبر عنه باللسان. وهذا التأويل في لغة القرآن كما قال تعالى عن يوسف أنه قال وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا. وقال تعالى هل ينظرون إلا تأويله يوم يأتي تأويله يقول الذين نسوه من قبل قد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق. وقوله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه تنازعوا. طيب. So the first meaning of ta'wil is what everyone? Tahrif. The second meaning of ta'wil is tafsir. The third meaning of ta'wil, and the ta'wil huwa al-haqiqa, is the reality in which one's speech returns back to, or the outcome of what it will be, or the outcome of affairs. وَإِنْ وَافَقَتْ ظَاهِرَهُ, if it agrees with what is apparent. For example, تَأْوِيلُ مَا أَخْبَرَ بِهِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ, the ta'wil of what was informed in paradise of eating and drinking, and garments, and marriage, and the establishment of the day of resurrection, and other than that. For verily these are realities that exist, of what cannot be attained or fathomed from its meanings as far as in our mind frame or in our mindset. We're going to explain that. Even though the tongue expresses it. This type of ta'wil in the language of the Quran, just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said about Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that Prophet Yusuf said, oh my father, he's talking about Ya'qub in the ayah, Ya abati, hadha ta'wilu ru'yaya. Ta'wilu ru'yaya. This is the ta'wilu ru'yaya. Ta'wil here can mean interpretation. However, it can also mean the meaning here, which is the third, what the outcome became in the end. Because what had ended up in the end is exactly what Prophet Yusuf had seen in the dream. It had became true and it became the reality. And that was the final outcome of the affair in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made true for him. He said that is the ta'wil of the vision from before in which my Lord made true. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it haqiqah. He made it a reality in which became the final outcome of that affair. Then in another ayah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Surah Al-A'raf, ayah number 53, هَلْ يَنظُرُونَ إِلَّا تَأْوِيلًا, are they not waiting except for the true reality to come? Or are they not waiting except for the final outcome of what will be the ultimate result? Is it clear, everyone, what I'm saying? Because if a person doesn't know these meanings, they recite the book of Allah, they will not know what it means. Are they not waiting except for its ta'wil? A person would say, what does it mean that ta'wil is supposed to come? Ta'wil means, are they not waiting except the reality to it? Are they not waiting except for the final outcome to come? He says, on the day when the reality hits, yawma yati ta'wiluhu. On the day when the ta'wil comes, this is the third meaning of ta'wil, the reality in which the affair will what? Or the final outcome will be. The day when that ta'wil comes, those who which they forgot from before will say, indeed, the messages of our Lord came with the truth. And also the statement of Allah Ta'ala in Surah An-Nisa, O you who believe, obey Allah and His Messenger, and those who are in authority over you, or amongst you. And if you differ in anything, then return it back to Allah and His Messenger. If you truly believe in Allah on the last day, that is the best and the most excellent of what? Ta'wil. The most excellent of ta'wil. What does it mean in ta'wil here? The best of outcomes, the best of results, the best of what the affair will be in the end. Is it clear, everyone? طيب. What is Shaykh al-Islam? He's talking about the third meaning here now. That the word ta'wil can also mean al-haqiqa, the reality in which speech inevitably will return back to. Meaning the true realities, not the meanings, of course, even though we established them. For example, as we know, the realities of those affairs are true. They are true. There are true realities to everything. For example, the establishment of the hour, the establishment of the day of resurrection, and what is its ta'wil? What is its reality? What is its inevitable outcome? As far as resurrection, the hereafter, as far as the hawl, the well of the message of Allah, the day of resurrection, the scales, the bridge over the hellfire, all of those realities, which also goes in accordance to this ta'wil. The ta'wil in regards to paradise. What is the realities? What is the realities of rivers of Lebanon and rivers of khamr, of what we understand is what we know of intoxicant drinks, even though they don't intoxify in paradise, even though it still takes the word khamr. Or the rivers of honey. A person, when they hear these words, they understand what they mean. But what goes against the mind of what people can't fathom is in a manner that's not the reality of what we see in this world. That's the issue. That's the reason why you'll find that some of the people who've been affected by Greek philosophy reject these meanings. Because they say only honey can emanate from bees. It's not acceptable. How can it be rivers of honey? لو فسر لك الإنسان or لو فسر لك الإنسان, the honey of paradise. And what will come to the mind of the so-called perception of honey in this regard? And what a person can express to the people, it wouldn't be this type of ta'wil that we're so-called given, which is the true reality of it. For example, we know in paradise there will be rivers of honey, and that there will be rivers of Lebanon, of what we know in this dunya, which is called Lebanon, which is a type of yogurt, or an-nahar from khamr. What we know of honey, everyone, is what? It's a sweet type of substance that emanates from a certain type of bug of what we know in this dunya. However, we know that Ibn Abbas mentioned and said, لَيْسَ فِي الدُّنْيَا مِمَّا فِي الْجَنَّةِ إِلَّا الْأَسْمَاءِ. There's nothing in this world of what is in paradise except names. So the word honey, or the word water, or lebanon, or khamr, أَدَلُّ دَلِيلَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ الْخَمْرِ. To give the perspective and clarify in a manner that we can say to the people in the most clearest way, is example of it is khamr. Everybody knows the word khamr means an intoxifying drink. which is a wicked, evil drink in this world that people understand to change the demeanor and the mindset or the mind frame of an individual. But in paradise, it does have the same name. But it's not in the same vessels or what is consumed out of in this dunya. You'll find in paradise, we know that the origin of khamr is made through what? Made through different types of fruits. Or when they ferment, then it becomes khamr, which is consumed in those vessels. However, can anyone understand that in the hereafter there will be khamr where rivers will be flown through of it? As we know, the origin of khamr, it emanates or it's made or produced from raisins, barley, corn, and the likes of that. That is what we see in this world. However, the realities in the hereafter, even though it has the same word, are different. That ta'weel, ta'weeluha ya'lamu ta'weeluha man akramahu Allah. The ta'weel of it, ya'lamu ta'weelaha man akramahu Allah. The ta'weel of it, meaning the realities they will taste and they will experience, no one will attain that knowledge of it except who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives honor to when they enter paradise. And they drink from all of those rivers. And that is the fadl of Allah that He gives to whom He wills. So, the meaning of ta'weel based upon this context, or what we're saying, or the meaning of it, is the third meaning. The third meaning means the true realities of affairs. Even though the names do agree. But the people will only know it after a certain time, when it will definitely come. So ta'weel, the ta'weel of the true reality of the day of resurrection, or the true reality of paradise, and the true reality of the hellfire, it will be known to people. However, no one knows the ta'weel, la ya'lamuhu illa Allah mutlaqan. Of course we know no one knows it truly, meaning the kayfiyah, the reality of it, except Allah ta'ala. The only affair of what we're talking about here is haqiqatu dhati. The only thing that is absolute, where no one knows except Allah ta'ala, is the affairs concerning His essence, names, and attributes. No one can then fathom or attain that except Allah. No one knows how His characteristics are. That type of ta'weel, no one knows except Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no one that knows it in any aspect. As for the other type of ta'weelat, for example, the ta'weel of the vision of Yusuf, or the dream of Yusuf, that we know, like we said, what had happened, which is the ta'weel of explanation, or the final outcome of what it became, or the reality of it. Some of the people, as we know, those who now understood the meaning of the dream, such as his father Yaqub, understood. But however, the true reality, what it became in the end, Allah Ta'ala allowed it to manifest in a manner that people truly seen and understood it in the end when the reality came. That is the ta'weel of the vision of Yusuf, in which the people did attain this knowledge ultimately in the end, when it happened. That reality did come to pass, and with that knowledge inevitably was attained. And similar to that is the people of paradise. The ta'weel of the reality of what's in paradise, when they enter it, they will attain it. And they will allow to what? They will allow to enjoy it, of the different types of na'im. As for the affair of what Allah Ta'ala is speaking about His affairs in regards to His essence, names, attributes, the true reality of it is, how they are, and His actions, no one knows that except Allah Himself. However, at the same time, we understand its meanings and we affirm it. These are the details in which we just mentioned, which was hidden from those who negated the names and attributes of Allah, in which they fell into mixing up the affairs until they fell into these great levels of deviation, saying that the affair needs to be ascribed to Allah as far as its meanings, which is absolute falsehood and nonsense. For verily, when a person now hears the hadith that the hearts of the servants of Adam are between the two fingers, between the fingers of the most merciful, that Allah twisted how He wills. Every servant, when they hear that hadith, They are effective. Why? Because they comprehend its meaning. Nobody thinks that when they hear fingers from the fingers of Allah, oh, it doesn't mean that. It means something that Allah will create, and He will twist the hearts of the children of Adam by that thing He created. No one understands that meaning when they hear these narrations. This type of nonsense is what these people were calling to. That when these type of narrations, when the people read them, it's incumbent upon them to take that word finger, twist the meaning, and say that it means something else in regards to what was understood from its apparent meaning. These are the affairs in which you'll find, in which if you was to now investigate and scrutinize, the reality of what they fell into is absolute nonsense, confusion, and contradictory. Why did they now turn away from the Kitab and Sunnah in this regard and cut their connection with the Salaf, except to them adopting Greek philosophy and giving precedence and so-called what rationalizes and agrees with the mind and intellect over what Allah Ta'ala has revealed to His Messenger, and taking the Kitab and Sunnah and making that the affair of what can be what, so-called shown to the mind, and if the mind doesn't agree with it, then we reject it. Then, as a result of it, they fell into affairs that's in contradiction to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended in regards to the meanings of those verses and the authentic Sunnah. And also what the people have wanted to now, so-called, rather than firmly holding on to the Salaf, and when they had now embarked upon those meanings, they had evil thoughts for the Sahaba, and with how they understood the religion, and the Tabi'een, and the A'immat al-Salaf. So all those are type of disturbances that they fell into, which we'll talk about and explain later. So let's turn the page, let's keep going. It says, with this type of ta'weel, هو الذي لا يعلمه إلا الله. فتأويل الصفات والحقيقة. For ta'weel of the sifat is the realities in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is alone or singled out by His knowledge, meaning how it is. فالكيف المجهول. It agrees with the statement of Imam Malik when it was asked concerning the ascension. The ascension of Allah is known, how it is not known. When Imam Malik said that statement, the ascension of Allah is known, meaning ma'lum al-ma'na. The ascension of Allah is known, meaning known in its meaning. How is Allah known? How is Allah ascend? Not known as far as its kayfiyah. فالاستواء معلوم يعلم معناه. Ascension is known as far as what it means and as far as its tafsir. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. كمالك وغيره الاستواء معلوم تنبه. He said that is the ta'weel based upon the first recitation in the ayah. That the ta'weel of sifat, of the attributes of Allah, meaning the reality of it, the haqiqah, the reality in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is singled out by its knowledge. Meaning, as far as the affairs of how it is, and the reality of it is, of His characteristics. No one knows His ascension, or dissension, or His face. He said, based upon the statement of Imam Malik and other than that, he said, the ascension of Allah is known. When Imam Malik said known, he meant ma'lum al-ma'na, what is known as far as the meaning. And kayf majhul, when he said kayf, meaning majhulul kayfiyah, wal haqiqah, wal kull. He said that it's majhul as far as the kayfiyah, the haqiqah, and the kun. That's not written in your book. It's majhul as far as how it is, the reality of it is, in the kun. Kunhun. And the kun, meaning the true reality of how it is. For verily, istiwa is known as far as its meaning, the tafsir of it. ويترجم بلغة أخرى. It also can be, of course, translated into another language, so it can be understood properly as far as its meaning. Because you'll find from the falsehood that is widespread amongst these people, they'll always try to so-called use a dalil, you don't know the Arabic language, which is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So in order for me to become truly Muslim, I would have to know Arabic. So I would have to say, I have to have knowledge of the Arabic language in order for me to testify to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So no one knows, or nobody's testification of coming to Islam is justified or is valid unless they know the Arabic language fluently in all its meanings first. That's absolute nonsense. Those affairs of what? Certain people out there have been Muslims for years. And some of them have memorized a lot of surah and ayat. So you mean to tell me that none of their Islam is valid until they actually understand Arabic properly? Or was a person given da'wah based upon another language, and then they expressed their desire to enter Islam based upon what they understood in that particular language, and they embraced Islam? And you'll find that's from the nonsense that they propagate here in this city and in other places to say, oh, you don't know the Arabic language. So when I now read a hadith that's been translated into English, that Allah descends at the third part of the night, oh, you don't know what that means because you don't understand Arabic. So if I was to wake up in the middle of the night, at the third part of the night, because I understand the hadith in English, that Allah will accept the invocation of the servant in that particular time, and I wake up to do it, and the fact that I did that, I did not understand it properly unless I heard it in the Arabic language and understood it in the Arabic language. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense. This is the nonsense that's propagated with these people. So the fact that I heard it in English and I'm doing something correct, even though it was translated in English, necessitates that basically what I did was invalid because I didn't understand it in Arabic? Doesn't make any sense. So I understood the descent of Allah in the third last part of the night, and for me to wake up at that night because I understood it properly, even though it was translated. So it doesn't make any sense what these people say. Absolute nonsense. Oh, you don't know Arabic. That's the reason why. You have to just leave it in Arabic. So I can't study Aqidah, which is the most important of all the affairs of the religion, unless I attain and understand Arabic fluently and properly. So the affairs of when I hear Allah descends, or that Allah has a face, and all these matters, you don't know the true reality unless you know Arabic first. That's absolute nonsense. So those matters you'll find that we said, brothers and sisters. It says here, وَأَمَّا الْكَيْفِيَّةِ كَيْفِيَّةَ ذَلِكَ الْإِسْتِوَاءِ بِغَسْتَى فَهُوَ التَّأْوِيلُ الَّذِي لَا يَعْلَمُهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. He said that the meaning of it here is the kayfiyah, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that is the ta'wil that no one knows except Allah. And that's just to sum it up. So that is the meaning of the ayah. The meaning of the ayah of no one knows his ta'wil except Allah, meaning the reality of what? Of how affairs are. Of the names and the attributes and the true reality of Allah Ta'ala's names and attributes. No one knows that except Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the meaning of the ayah. And the kayfiyah of the other affairs, of how certain other affairs in the hereafter are. The affair, like we said, based upon their so-called meaning of it, or twisted meaning, is to say all of it is entrusted to Allah. How Allah's attributes are, and the meaning, which is absolute nonsense. For anyone who was to hear these affairs that had knowledge of what these people are saying, they would probably laugh in their face. Doesn't make any sense that Allah Ta'ala will reveal the most important of all matters and make it the most complicated to comprehend. Those matters is based upon what they say. This is what they do, and this is what they're saying to the people. That you don't understand the concept because these are so-called affairs that you have to intensify your insight and knowledge to the point where you got to go beyond what the apparent meaning is. When you see the word ascension or face, you have to investigate more. Those affairs are absolute baseless, and it's not substantiated with any evidence. To make the affair which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the most important for all human beings to understand, the most complicated, which is absolutely, like we said, rejected from Kitab and Sunnah. We'll stop here inshallah. طيب وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. Any questions about the lesson? Any questions?